this is pretty cut and dry fraud, and my guess is he'll go to jail, and he'll probably go for a long time. And I don't wish that on anyone because I did it. But I think that in particular, the SEC is very, very nasty when money goes from a poor person who's uninformed to a person who makes a lot of money, and then that whatever they bought drops in value dramatically. You can sort of like try to create some machination in your head that, oh, well, maybe it's not a security. Oh, well, maybe it's not this or that. But if you actually read the fraud statute, it's like one sentence and it's like extremely vague for that reason, because our legislators a long time ago realized they couldn't enumerate every single type of fraud. So wire fraud is literally fraud over the wires, any kind of electronic communication. And Hart, bless his soul, what's his real name again? I'm not going to call him Richard Hart anymore.
Richard Schuler,
aka Richard Hart. I'm surprised he's not a criminal defendant yet. Usually there's a sort of a parallel process, but it doesn't always happen that way. But the point is, he's made a lot of statements over the web, over YouTube, over Twitter, prognosticating about the price of his security or his asset or his whatever. And, if that induced you to buy it, right, it doesn't matter if it's a stock or a bond or a Beanie Baby. His claims induced you to buy it, and then you got injured by that, by a false claim or an incomplete claim. I actually had a lot of issues in my case where it was omitting something. Like if you omitted on the fact that, some of this money is going to go to my pocket. Well, all they have to do is put somebody on the stand and say, wouldn't you have liked to known that some of the money was going to go to his pocket? Wouldn't that have been important for your decision? Wouldn't you have liked to known that beforehand? And as long as one person says yes, it's securities fraud. And it's a really, look, I don't like the rules, by the way. I did 7 years for those rules. I don't like them at all. I don't think.
I'm not familiar with your story. Maybe just give us a little bit of background around your story and how you ended up doing 7 years.
Sure, really fast. I had a bunch of very small hedge funds. They made quite a bit of money. They made about 3 or 4 times their money. During that process, the courts and the government, including the SEC, convinced a jury, at least out of 8 charges, they convinced the jury that I was guilty of 3 and I was not guilty of 5, that I lied about my funds. So even if you make your investors a fortune and you tell a lie or omit something, you don't even have to tell an affirmative lie. Even if you leave something out that an investor would have thought would have been important. For example, I'm going to take your money and spend it on a diamond. I feel like that would have been important to me to know beforehand.
So
and it's not like some
the thing that everyone knew was that 100% of the money went to the pocket. Like that. That's like that's like the whole premise.
The funny thing about that is that I'm not sure you appreciate, having sat in a criminal trial for 6 weeks. The average juror is a postal service worker, a homemaker. They're not sophisticated people necessarily. It's a jury of your peers. They don't understand any of that stuff. They look at wallets. They look at this stuff. They don't give a shit. They're going to say this person who had $5,000 bought whatever this thing is called Hex for $4,000 of their dollars, and now they have no dollars and they have Hex, which is worthless. And this guy is wearing Louis Vuitton. He's wearing, he's apparently bought all this stuff with their money, and that's it. He's guilty. I mean, it really isn't that more complicated. I think the problem is, that we tend to try to over rationalize the justice system when, there's a reason that 99% of people brought to trial go to jail. There's no way out. Once you're in, all the arguments in the world kind of, fly in the face of, they've got the FBI, they've got the American bald eagle there, they've got witnesses that tell you how bad the defendant is, and it basically just collapses on you. And if you doubt me, look at the 20 crypto people that are in prison, and none of them who have beaten their charges. Vitalik's old friend is in prison with some of my buddies right now, who's doing 5 years. And there's countless others. Look at my other friend, Charlie Shrem, who did some time, right? I mean, who has beaten charges in crypto? Nobody. Nobody's ever heard the word.
But we don't have, but Martin, there's no criminal charges. There's no DOJ indictment yet, but you're saying you're pretty confident. Like, you use you as an example, or Rand referred to you as an example, but in your case, you didn't lose your investors' money. You actually made the money, and you still went to jail for 7 years. So obviously with Richard and the amount of money lost, and I think Eric, you did a tweet on this about comparing the amount of money lost in Hex versus, I think it was Luna. I can't remember which ones you're referring to. It was significantly more.
The numbers were wrong.
Okay, but it's really large numbers. Let's just leave it at that. So you're saying that puts him. Go ahead.
Yeah. What's really funny about the DOJ is that when somebody sort of murmured the numbers are wrong, and I think that's true. In my case, I actually had to pay back every dollar that the investors invested in my funds, which was $8 million. Even though they got about $30 million in returns, I still had to pay $8 million in damages, and they gave the 7 years based on the $8 million.
Just please explain to me, what do you mean damages? If they made money, there are no damages. What am I missing here?
You're entering the world of the Department of Justice. Nothing makes sense. The way they look at a loss and a victim is anybody who's ever been lied to, that amount of money they invested immediately is all a loss. It's called intended loss. So there's two theories of loss in the government. There's actual loss and intended loss, and they take the greater of the two. So if you actually lost the money, that right then and there is immediately securities fraud, and you're liable for the whole amount in time you're going to get sentenced and financial penalty, which in Richard's case, I wouldn't be worried about the financial penalties right now. I'd be worried about the time penalty. So if somebody put $50,000 in Hex and they lost it all, basically that accrues to the loss amount not because they lost the money, but because they lost the money and there was a lie somewhere. Any lie at all, any kind of omission. And by the way, prognosticating that your security is going to be the best security ever, really bad idea, right?
Yeah, that's the problem. And I have a question, sort of comment. Martin, maybe you can answer, or maybe somebody else. So we just made sort of this equivalency between the losses of BlockFi, Celsius, Voyager, et cetera. That money was actually lost, right? It's in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. In this case, the price of Hex is massively down, but unless I'm missing something, I mean, we can't judge the future price of something. Like everything that's down, it can go back up. So have these people effectively actually lost their money, or are they just down on their investment? And does that semantic even matter at this point?
To give you an example, so I invested in, I bought my first Bitcoin through Mt. Gox. And as everyone knows, Mt. Gox collapsed and lost 800,000 or 600,000 Bitcoins from people. Billions of dollars were lost. I actually still made money buying Bitcoin at Mt. Gox, because even the fractions of Bitcoin that I'm going to get back, which is like 15% or something like that, is still going to be up like 15x from when I bought it if you denominate it in dollar value. And Mark Karpelès still went to prison, right? So Mark Karpelès went to prison for embezzlement, even though that I made way more than I would have made if I invested the money in the stock market.
I mean, fraud is completely divorced from gain or loss. For example, if I went to Vegas, if I told my investors I had a quant fund that did, diffusion modeling of stock prices, and then I went to Vegas, put all the money in black and tripled their money or 10x their money or whatever.
Irrelevant, obviously.
And I gave them back the money. I still defrauded them, even if I made up 10x. And some of them may say, gosh, I love you for making me 10x. I don't want you to go to jail. And I had witnesses like that. So I think even though Hart has all these people behind him, it doesn't matter.
I think I'm just making the point sort of a false equivalency between bankruptcy and an asset being down in price. Now, I will say this, though, which I always find ironic, and to echo Eric's points from before, I've been as outspoken against the SEC as effectively everyone. I don't think anyone on the planet is hashtag fire Gary Gensler more than I have. And I always find these things interesting because since it is a civil claim and it is the SEC is going to come in and it's not criminal. They're going to come in and punish Richard Hart effectively retroactively. And if he's guilty or something like that happens, theoretically, that could send the price of Hex to zero and be the reason that everybody ends up losing all their money.
It's super ironic. I was a publicly traded company CEO, and the day I got arrested, one of my stocks fell 90%. And it caused more damages and losses than any of the alleged crimes.
So they're not protecting anyone by doing this retroactively.
I mean, guys,
FTX. They say FTX is in the name of consumer protection, but everybody's already lost their money and they're making it worse. Go ahead, Rand.
I've got to be honest. I got to be honest. Watching the U.S. justice system and watching the U.S. enforcement agencies from the outside, as someone who didn't grow up in the United States, I'm absolutely flabbergasted by how the U.S. has achieved what it's achieved.
And bankruptcy is worse. And bankruptcy is worse.
It's so much worse.
But their bankruptcy processes are laughable. I mean, I'm just watching the FTX, the Celsius, the Voyager bankruptcies. The processes are laughable. The costs are absolutely laughable. Watching the justice system, you're telling me that the reason why I'm not going to get a fair trial is because I'm being tried by a postal worker who's got no chance of understanding the case technically, and then still thinking that that's the best justice system in the world is laughable. Watching enforcement agencies claim that they're protecting. I mean, watching enforcement agencies claim that they are protecting investors when it is clear that they are the reasons why investors are losing more money than anything else is laughable. I as an outsider to the US,
it gets much worse. Like, so the SEC has something called the ALJ, which is the administrative legal judge, and so they have their own court in essence. So they have an SEC appointed person act as the adjudicator for the SEC case. Now, Richard's going to the Eastern District of New York, which is a very interesting choice by the SEC. And my guess is there could actually be a sealed indictment while they wait for Richard. They may be indicting him and extraditing him at the same time. And what we've seen from this DOJ is a very, very aggressive crypto and kind of fraud in general stance where like Bankman usually, like, I guess the point I'm making is usually there's the statute of limitations, which is in our country 5 years. So you have 5 years as a law enforcement to arrest the person. And I was arrested at 4 years and 10 months because nothing in the government goes fast, right? There's no, there's no reason to rush into it. And so the fact that
Hart's best option now is to donate to Democrats. I think he needs to quickly donate to Democrats.
I don't think that'll help. But the point is for SBF, they could have waited for 4.5 years to arrest him. You actually get to 5 years until the crime ends. So the clock kind of keeps going. And anyway, they arrested him right away. They did the same thing to one of my friends who's currently still sitting in jail, a certain arbitrageur you guys may know, who's traffics in a fruit named Protocols. Avi is who I'm talking about. But anyway, he's still sitting. Yeah, I was talking to Avi 2 days before he got arrested, and he was going to come to the city and hang out with me. And what do they have? They had a sealed indictment waiting for him as soon as he landed, and he still hasn't made bail. So I think that it's possible that they're just waiting for Richard to arrive at JFK.
Yeah, and Martin, to your point, what's interesting actually about Mango Markets and Avi is that he made the point that he was not actually committing any sort of crime, like very publicly came out and said, "Listen, this is in the contract. I'm just utilizing the features of the contract." That sort of rings familiar here.
Yeah, when you go to a jury, all bets are off. And look at if you don't believe me, just look at the percentage of people who get acquitted. It is very close to 1%. So somebody mentioned
Martin, how much did it cost you? How much did it cost you to defend this?
Are you talking about legal fees alone?
Forget about loss of income. Forget about loss of income, loss of reputation. Like, what do you need to take on, like, to defend yourself?
I think for a really robust criminal defense, I would say at least 20 million, and for I'd say a civil defense at least 10 or 15 million. But you're cooked either way.
If you don't have it, what happens?
So 5% of the stable coins still sitting in Richard's sacrafice wallets. Roughly.
We know that Richard can afford
they'll try to freeze those. By the way, they will try very hard to make sure that any illicit gotten funds are not used for your legal defense. They get really angry when
unless you're SBF.
If you organize your company really intelligently and you get insurance and you get a board and you try to do all that. I know Sam didn't even have a board, but like you could theoretically get some money for your legal defense. It depends on how raunchy your crime was. And I think in this case, they're going to say, look, you can't use the victim's money to defend yourself. That's insane. But just a couple more points I wanted to make real quick is, in the SEC lawsuit, yeah, I hate when people say prosecute or charge. The SEC sues you. That's all they can do. And I hate the SEC more than anyone. I've battled with them since I was 19 years old. And I beat them every time except once. But the point is, they seem to try to make Hex in his alter ego, which is an important theory in the law. And again, we think about the crypto world and stuff like that. None of that stuff matters. It's how a jury's going to look at it. And they're going to say, Hex Schmex, this is hard. This is Richard. This is just an extension of him in computer code. There's no code is law. Talk to Avi about that, right? Like all that stuff just doesn't apply because all they have to do is prove wire fraud. All they have to do is prove the statutes. If you read the statutes, they're very, very vague and image matters a lot. So when you put somebody sitting next to in a courtroom, you drag them in. Remember the prosecution goes first, so you get weeks and weeks of why this guy's a bad guy, and all of the testimony is canned. Every single thing is rehearsed, and again, you have a 99% conviction rate. So it really is kind of kangaroo court in a lot of ways. I mean, ask yourself, how many times, like, why should the government win 99% of the time? Like, how could they be so accurate and so smart? And I think the reality is it's kind of stacked against you. So there really is no defense if he gets indicted. And I think that the ultimate question is to try to avoid indictment.
No, but no, you said so.
We've had
model
for like past 20 minutes of this
2 seconds, model,
parade of like
model,
hallucinations where we have a finished product.
Just
What's
2 seconds. I just wanted to ask one more question to Martin. Just say that what's the likelihood that you'll win when you're sued by the SEC or when you're facing criminal charge? You say it's like 1%, Martin?
Yeah, I'd say less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
You know, so not guilty. Yeah, it's like China or Russia. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that.
Yeah,
The DOJ doesn't take cases
less
they're
than
going
1%.
to lose. They don't.
Less than 1%. Fact. That is statistically correct.
And hold on, less than 1% applies to what exactly? So you're acquitted when
if you're getting in a criminal prosecution by the government.
That's mental. Like the SEC has an 85-90% success rate, which is already really high. We were talking about this earlier. But now we're talking about the DOJ success rate of 99%. Are we sure about that?
And can we zoom out and frame what's going on here with Hex? Like we've had this now 20 minutes of like hallucinations about, I mean, real serious stuff that we're talking about. But what we have is a finished product with flawless uptime on a network that was delivered, on a decentralized exchange that was delivered. But all of it's working flawlessly. And
yeah, I'm gonna bow out. Like, I don't understand the purpose of having these like hexagons talking Richard Hart talking points. That's not an interesting conversation. I'm gonna bow out.
But Eric, you're the only one technically that can help us refute these claims.
I know a lot about crypto myself, not as much as Eric, but what I'll say is that the nice thing about the law is when I got arrested, all of my drug companies ran. All of my drug companies ran.
You guys had 20 minutes to express this. I wanted to make a simple point, and I got interrupted. Can I make a simple point about what we've done here with the founder who has delivered perfect, flawless product with complete uptime that pays us to our cold storage wallet? Let me make it here is we're talking about life in prison for a founder because they failed to ask permission. He failed to ask permission in this corrupt system before he acted and innovated. And the community isn't here claiming fraud. The community isn't here claiming fraud. They're here defending the founder and his action against this corrupt system. But we just spent 20 minutes painting this insane picture about what could happen to him because he didn't ask permission.
The system isn't saying it's the problem.
But
that's the system.
And I'll be quiet. That's
the system.
The acquittal rate. The acquittal rate is not 1%, guys. It's 0.4% in 2020. In 2021,
it's at sub 1%, below 1%.
But also that's misinterpreting because only cases that they think they can win do they bring. Jack, just to give an introduction to Jack, if people already don't know, he's one of the Google people from a long time ago. He's been in the startup community for a long time. Palo Alto Software before crypto. He's founder of other crypto projects as well, his separate networks and so forth. So I think his perspective is interesting. He has a relationship of sorts with Richard. He has a relationship of sorts with hexagons. So I am curious about his framing when it goes to being a American citizen in a tech-centric environment, when it goes to also navigating what is a security, what is not a security.
Hey guys, how's everybody doing? Crazy week. Definitely this news that came out was a long time coming. It's kind of like a combination of things. I mean, like definitely when you buy the world's largest diamond and you're covered with watches and you tell people to hate you, it's kind of like almost you're asking your community to look at things and maybe 95% of people actually love this showmanship that Richard was exhibiting, but 5% who bought the top of Hex, they didn't like it at all, and it was ultimately the community members that basically complained to SEC. I mean, I don't know those people personally, but I am in a bunch of hexagon groups just hanging out there, and a lot of people are pretty smart in there, but a lot of people really don't care what he shows. But those who really got affected by Hex falling, they had the reasons, and those reasons they were shown on YouTube by Richard. So ultimately, it's kind of like pretty obvious that happened. My kind of issue with Hex always was that it had the financial administrative keys, and it was very obvious that the OA address, no matter how many times Richard has disclaimed that it's not his, can be actually potentially be proven that it is his, or rather the intent of controlling of the financial system within the smart contract. Even though smart contract is immutable, if you control the OA, like basically Eric mentioned, you do control the outcome of all of the toggles and knobs on the contract. So that is the control of the contract, obviously. But there's a bigger issue here at stake, actually. So like, yeah, people put in money into crypto and people lose money all the time. This isn't new, actually. Flip a coin, you're gonna lose all your money. I mean, it's like that's crypto 101. The biggest issue that I have is the potential damage to the crypto ecosystem as a whole, where the process, or rather the concept of sacrifice that was introduced by Richard, kind of like, basically, if you say this magic word sacrifice, then all of a sudden you're not breaking the law. And obviously, like, the definition of sacrifice, if you ask a Hexagon what sacrifice is, that basically means that you're giving your money away and there's no expectations of profit. Well, the question is then, well, why is everybody so upset? If you're not expecting profit and you're expecting your money to be gone, then obviously why are you going to SEC and complaining about it? And I understand maybe you were not the person who sacrificed any money. Maybe you just bought the top and then you went to SEC and said, hey, this guy is a fraud. So, and enough of those complaints come in, and the case actually gets larger. And obviously the sacrifice wallet has like billions of dollars sitting in it, so it makes you a target. It's like you have a bullseye painted on your back. Now, the bigger issue that I see is that as Richard has popularized the word sacrifice, a lot of projects and a lot of smart people got into the situation where they thought, well, if Richard can get away with it, maybe we can get away with it also. And it's actually not great for crypto, because we're in crypto for the purposes of decentralization, immutability, and all of the first principles that crypto has presented since Bitcoin. Now, when somebody comes and says, oh, by the way, you can actually print your tokens out of thin air and then sell them and call it a sacrifice, well, sacrifice would be is that a bunch of people give you money without expectations, and then you get 10, 15, 20 other projects do the same thing, basically thinking that, okay, this is definitely not a security, we're going to get away with it because Richard said so, and all we need to do is produce this magic incantation of sacrifice, and then all is well. So
yeah,
that
Jack,
is
can I ask you, sorry, good. I want to ask you a question. This sacrifice thing keeps coming back up, and it's boggling my mind, because the same people who are saying they sacrificed to the contract will be the same ones to talk about how much money they made. Why on God's green earth would anybody send money for no reason with no expectation of anything to a smart contract?
Because people are free to take their own risk and free to make their own choice.
Or is it?
That's giving
but
Jack,
is it? Or is it?
You take risk with the expectation.
Or do they, Jack?
You can't say it's taking risk.
Jack, or
taking risk is the expectation of earning.
Jack, or can I frame it another way? Or are they expecting profit and they know that Richard is calling it sacrifice to avoid the SEC, but behind it, but and that's just semantics. And and the reason that Richard Hart keeps talking about the price going up, and that's probably the main thing he talks about every time he brings up Hex when he was on my show, is about the price. And everyone in all these communities talking about the price, and they're upset when the price goes down, means that they are expecting a profit, and semantics was used purely to avoid the law. Is that a fair statement, Jack?
Everyone has the same understanding.
That is exactly right. It doesn't matter, you call it a duck, not a dog, or a dog. It quacks like a duck. It is a duck. It doesn't matter what it's called. It's an investment. It's not like the thing is that cult forming 101. You have to give vocabulary in language to your members. And so if everybody's repeating the same word until it gets like this new meaning, okay, it's a type of investment we call a sacrifice to get away with the fact that the government is stupid enough not to realize that sacrifice is not you not having any expectations. Of course, everybody had all of the expectations. Of course. I mean, in most of the projects that are launching after Hex that are calling for sacrifices, they're actually funding themselves to launch those projects. And a lot of those projects will be rag pulls. Those people will take your money, will disappear, and you'll be left with digital artifacts that are worth nothing.
Let me ask you a question. I want to ask. I know Martin, you've got your hand up, but I want to ask Dipcatcher and Model. If you guys agree with this statement, and try to be as direct as you can with the answer. I'm genuinely curious. Do you think my statement is fair? Is that everyone was expecting and I'm not saying that makes Richard guilty as for the courts to decide, but I'm just saying, is it fair to say that most investors, if not all of them, but let's say most of them, were at least hoping, if not expecting, a profit, and that's the reason they invested, and they know that sacrifice was a term used purely to avoid the SEC. Would that be a fair statement to model on Dipcatcher? And try to be direct with the answer if possible.
I mean, I mean that's one way to frame it, but like we could point out that this was one of the fairest launches in all of crypto, in the history of crypto, and the disclaimer wasn't cryptic, and it was blunt and brutal. And what people may have wanted to participate in, even though it's so hard to do something like that with the SEC and all these rules and stipulations and life in prison and everything, is a way to participate in a
nothing to do.
But yeah, no. So you answered. Yeah, I think the first part, model. The first part. Hold on, Scott.
I answered the
question.
So
he did. He said that's one way to frame it, and just kind of I appreciate you to answer it, and just to kind of press you a bit further, model. Is that a fair way of framing it? We're not the court, so we can't decide whether that's enough to not be considered security.
It's not a fair way to frame it in the light of we're talking about life in prison for the founder who innovated without permission.
No, so this is so we're
I don't think anyone here wants him to
go to
jail for
and
life,
and we're not.
Mario, can I answer your question?
Yeah. Let's see what Dip. Hold on. Dipcatcher, what do you think? And then I'll add on to it. Just a reminder that Richard talks mainly about the price of Hex and how you're going to make a lot of money.
Okay, so there were about 200,000 people that participated in these sacrifices. So there's obviously going to be a whole range of people's mentality going into it. I personally viewed it like a donation that I did not expect to even, honestly, I didn't even think that it was going to be delivered, honestly, realistically. And
but did you think you'll make, but did you expect to make a profit? Did you expect the token to go up?
I hope that it goes up, but I do not expect.
Is that the reason? Is that the reason you invested?
No, I like I said, I viewed it like a donation, like as if I was donating to.
So why did you? I appreciate you answering. So why did you donate though? What's the cause that you donated for?
Probably because support of somebody who, over the course of by then 4 years that I've been interacting with him online, has just provided value through, community building, through the education, through producing a quality DeFi asset, like an industry category creator of these like yield producing assets. So like it was not so much for the investment side of it. It was really just in support of a. But did Richard need that support? Like, because you could look at someone like Andreas Antonopoulos, for example, who would appreciate, or would need that support a bit further. So do you genuinely think like Richard? And I'm not trying to put you in a bad spot. I'm just curious to go a bit back and forth before going to Gary. Do you think Richard and the money he's made being early in Bitcoin needed that support? Like, do you genuinely think you were donating money to Richard because you're supporting the cause? Or maybe that played a small role, but what I'm trying to get out of you, Dipcatcher, is that I genuinely think that either, I don't know whether you don't want to admit it, or maybe it's a small part of why you've invested, but there must have been a part of you that said, there is a likelihood that this is going to make a lot of money, because Richard keeps talking about thousands of percent returns. Go ahead, man. Well, at the time, having experienced those in real life, having experienced massive upside. I mean, look at my pinned tweet. I was one of the first people promoting Hex on Twitter. Having seen positive outcome from participating in this person's, minting of things, or just in the launches of these assets, that probably suspended all disbelief, where I understood the risk of this donation I'm making could never come back. The asset that perhaps could get airdropped if it ever launches.
But that's a risk. So that's a
yeah.
So Dipcatcher, just so I invested in a whole bunch of projects with tokens locked up, and many of them I don't expect them to launch the platform. It doesn't mean that I don't want them to. Many of them I expect them to go to zero. Doesn't mean I want them to. That's just an expectation based on the statistical probability that they'll succeed. I know a minority of them will do well, and I was expecting a profit. My question though is, in your tweets, because I know you've been early on tweeting about Hex. So in your tweets, which anyone could go back and verify, have you ever talked about, either in a comment or a tweet, do you think you've ever talked about why you think Hex will go up in price, or argued back and forth with someone that says Hex is a scam, and then talked about the chart or the price going up?
I've probably been one of the leading proponents of Hex and defending Hex from false claims of it being a scam. And the reason why I defend it so heavily, and why I feel like I have a strong backing, is because Hex as an asset has really strong monitoring.
Fair. But I mean, so the question, the question though, did you talk about in any comments or tweets? Did you ever say that you think the price will go up? Or why you think the price will go up? Explain to people that whole narrative of why it will do whatever number of X's.
Yes.
So what's the tweet, Scott?
Let me
go ahead.
Let me cite
look at his tweets. His last tweet is about it. It's literally Hex value is up massively from year one when people could mint Hex
I talk about
went to, all right, everyone that sacrificed for Pulsechain was at a break even until yesterday. That was 21 minutes ago while we're on this. I'm not even trying to say something negative, but just
and this doesn't let me add, sorry, Tanto, one more thing I want to add. This doesn't put you in a bad light, in my opinion. It's not aimed at you. This is, I think anyone in the audience right now listening, or even anyone on stage that says they're not here for the money, I think they're full of shit. There's just different spectrum of.
Dude, Mario, really quick. My favorite argument during NFT summer was that people were like, I am my turned up turtle or my, linguistic lion or whatever the fuck.
Linguistic lion.
I'm here because I am my lion, and my lion is my soul and my heart, and I'm here. And when price goes down, you're not your fucking lion anymore. And I'm sorry, it's the exact same thing. Everybody should admit, and there's nothing wrong with it, they're here to make money. Why else are you here? You don't send money to a billionaire because and there's nothing wrong with that. But why are we even pretending?
You can't say there is no ethos. There's people in crypto not only to make money, like they believe in what crypto stands for. They're people, mainly those people that are here right now in the midst of the bear market.
I'm saying on the projects like this that are launched where you send your money into something, you have an expectation of earning money. You're not donating to a billionaire because he needs the money. Give me a break. And I'm not even saying that's bad or good. I'm just saying that it's disingenuous.
But it's a choice. It's a choice. Do you believe that I should have the right?
He's off exactly. So someone that has hundreds of millions of dollars. So Richard Hart having a lot of money from Bitcoin prior to.
I'm saying, why would people? I just can't get there. Why people are sending Richard Hart money for something that he wouldn't deliver?
And your misunderstanding is probably why I probably massively outperform you. So it makes sense why you don't get it.
It's not hard. Just one thing, unfortunately.
You said you're not here for profit. Now you're telling me you outperform me. What is wrong?
Dude, what are you talking about?
I don't understand this.
He just said he just agreed with me what I said a few months ago. You're a shit trader, Scott.
After listening,
go ahead, Martin.
After listening to this after listening to this for 20 minutes, I'm revising my projection. I am now certain Hart is going to jail.
I've changed my.
Hey guys,
hey
guys.
And
if you wanted to sacrifice something, why do you need to get token back? I mean, a true meaning of the word sacrifice is that you money to someone.
Yeah, shit.
You don't need any token.
Jack, you know what, Jack? You know what, Jack? You just did. Like, I'm so pissed off at myself, and I think anyone will admit it. Like, our whole perspective changed. Remember, Scott, how I said earlier, and I think some people agreed, I think even Rand agreed, is that I think, Richard might have just outsmarted the SEC. And then Jack just made the most obvious points. Like, hold on, if you're donating money, why the fuck do you need a token? Why do you sit there holding that token? How is that?
And why are you telling me? And why are you telling me how your donation outperformed my trade?
And then what?
No, not the donation. That's not what I said. Outperformed you.
No.
One thing I'll say.
Martin, I agree with you. Like you said, he's going to jail now. Your sister is going to jail. I was pretty confident that he's even outsmarted the SEC based on the lawyers we had early on stage. But then when Jack came in and just stated the most obvious fucking thing, I'm like, shit, it looks pretty bad now.
There's no jury that will ever. All they have to do is bring the Louis Vuitton, and they're going to bring the diamond into the courtroom, and they're going to be like, "So what does this have to do with Hex?" And it's just going to be such an embarrassing moment that the jury is going to roll their eyes and say, it's obvious this guy's
let's see, Martin.
criminal. But
go ahead, Martin. Sorry, and then go to Gary afterwards.
This guy Martin has no fucking idea what he's talking about, and I can't.
Bro,
I don't understand.
Okay, hold on, Soldier. You gotta hold on, Soldier. 2 seconds. Put your hand up, bro. Afterwards, I just brought you up on stage. I don't know you, so don't ruin it for us. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, let me just make one last point. I'm an entrepreneur. I invest in entrepreneurs. I have no problem with the actual product. I think that if it's a good product, it'll survive Richard Hart dying. It doesn't matter, right? Like, Satoshi's not around to help us. Lots of my drug companies survived me going to prison. If it's really a good product and you believe in it, then what does it matter if Hart's innocent or guilty? If he misappropriated $10-20 million to buy luxury goods, okay, he'll pay the price for that. Maybe he'll do jail time. Maybe he won't. But Hex fundamentals should not change, right?
That's a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about if he went away. Like, I mean, the OA has taken no action in over a year now, over 2 years. Like the OA itself, in terms of its actions with Hex, hasn't taken any action for like over 2 years. And the only action that was ever taken was sacrificing its own Hex to itself, and then those Hex just sit there. So like, and if that continued to happen, say none of those addresses ever moved any funds again, then it just over time gets entirely diluted out. And so it's like those won't even be a main component of the supply, starting in about 20 years. So you're right. You're absolutely right about that. That it could absolutely go.
I think he made two key mistakes. The first was to put his hand in the cookie jar and spend some money, whether he had good intentions or not a good look. And the second is I was a publicly traded company CEO. You cannot tell people that your stock's going to go up or you're going to have a 38% yield or you think it's going to be a great security.
Yeah, look, this is a very important point. Like so I took a company public a couple of years ago now, and I would get, the chairman and the board would tell me, Mario, never even mention the price ever. It's like a big, massive red line. If I even mention it briefly, it's just suddenly it's like a crisis meeting that we all have to have.
Right, but Mario, their argument is it's not a security.
Yeah, but
but obviously the SEC doesn't care. I've been saying that since the beginning.
Yeah, so would you say, Gary? I've got two questions for you, Gary. Number one, do you think if this ends up being considered a security, then Richard is in deep trouble, considering everything we've said, including that last point? And so that's question number one, Gary. And question number two, I'd love your comments on the back and forth, a really good discussion we had with Dipcatcher earlier regarding and the points that Jack made is that if you're not expecting a profit, why would you be talking about the price? And are you genuinely not expecting a profit? Are you really donating to a person like Richard Hart? And why the hell do you need a token that you sit there holding and then eventually sell for a profit?
To the first topic, to me, again, it just seems like language. Money is language. Ledger entry is language. Social signaling is language, right? You say, hey, work with me because I'm a multimillionaire, I'm a billionaire. When people make content all day long, especially about cryptocurrency or stock market or bonds, and they're talking about, macro trends or look at the chart because this is what this thing did in the past and maybe it'll do it again because these are things are cycles. I think it's disingenuous when people say, like you had said, do people have expectation of profit? I don't know, because I know a lot of people do foolish things that have nothing to do with money.
So why would Gary, why would they need a coin if they're not expecting a profit?
There's again, I speculate, the OA has an awful lot of tokens, coins. And, if those have moved into the marketplace, then there's going to be repercussions. Very similar to building a rocket and then exploding it on the launch pad. Like it didn't serve its purpose. So when it goes to like, why do people buy anything and lock it away inside of a drawer in the kitchen? Like people do things all the time. Some people, certainly they get involved with cryptocurrency because they say, hey, Bitcoin used to be a penny and Ethereum used to be 15 cents. And by the way, if I stake my Ethereum, I can get 4% APY by being a validator, basically with no work if I just do an AWS server. So like there's all kinds of examples in this community, in this culture of people getting invested and saying, hey, I'm going to talk to my next door neighbor about Cardano. Why? Because they have smart contracts now. Like this conversation is weird because everyone is involved for their own reasons. Some of it has to do with financial
So Gary,
gain.
can I ask you a question on a personal level? Did you expect to make money, or were you hoping to make money with Hex?
I've speculated on a lot of startups, and I got involved with a lot of startups and software that went to zero. 9 out of 10 went to absolute zero.
But were you hoping? Were you hoping or expecting Hex to get a return for you?
I think I'm going to speak to my 2017 experience. I think I bought something like 100 different startups or ICOs or products, whether they were good or bad. Market cycles affected whether I had an exit
but did you,
at a
on
profit
those,
or
yeah,
exit at a
true,
loss.
but on those ones, on the ICOs, let's move away from Hex. On those ICOs, did you expect? Were you hoping or expecting to make a profit when you invested in those ICOs, or were you donating to those founders?
Hoping.
Yeah, so you know where I'm coming with this. Like, it's a very valid argument. Again, it's not your fault. Obviously, stop putting you on the spot, but it's not a difficult argument to make, in my opinion. It won't be a difficult argument to make. At least now, this is what I believe after this whole 2-hour, 3-hour conversation, especially with Jack jumping in and making the points. But let's see, Hexagon Soldier, you were pretty vocal earlier. Like, is there something we're missing here? Like in the points we're making, like you get a token, you put in money. Did you donate money to Richard Hart, or did you invest expecting to make money? Because looking at your timeline, I was going through it earlier. It definitely looked like you were expecting and hoping to make money?
I made money. I wasn't expecting to make money. I made money in the coin. Everybody goes into cryptocurrency to make money. Everybody goes into
jailed. I
cryptocurrency
think
to hope
I
to
can.
make money.
Soldier.
You're putting Richard in jail.
2 seconds. Sorry, I'm gonna give you the mic again, just because you were very loud. But just want to say, I think this is recorded, so I think your recording that clip is going to be played in court. Just a heads up, just so you know. But continue, please.
But that's okay. I'm telling the truth. There's nothing wrong with that. What I want to do is
Agree.
talk about Marco. Marco kept saying that once that Richard is he's for certain that Richard is going to jail. Why? Who did he defraud? You keep saying that he spent the money. Did you know that Richard was rich before Hex? Did you know that Richard was mining Bitcoin in 2010? Do you know how much Bitcoin he has? So
Allegedly.
the guy was rich before Hex. So what money did he spend? I want to know who was it that he defrauded? Because
your point, yes. So Hex, the point. I'll answer your question there, and Martin, maybe you do want to answer it briefly. And I think we've talked about it earlier. It's about talking about the price, talking about a security going up, and promising certain returns. Is that a simple way of saying it, Martin? One of the reasons.
No,
what he promised what he said was that you can
Soldier, let's get Martin to respond. Go ahead.
So look, I'm a pro entrepreneur. I wish the best for Hart. The problem is that the law, which is something I don't control, the world would be very, very, very different if I did. I wouldn't have gone to jail myself. The problem is the law says that if you lie while you sell a security, it is security fraud and you go to jail. If you omit any information that the buyer would have liked to have known while you sell a security, you've committed securities fraud and you're going to jail. So it's and some of these laws apply outside of securities too. So wire fraud is if you defraud anybody out of money by any means, securities or not, that's a crime as well. So the problem isn't so much that I don't like Richard or something. I personally, by the way, I don't. I met him on Mario's podcast here, and I found him to be insufferable. But I can put that aside and say, look, I hope that you all win, and I hope you all make a lot of money. And I'm pro-entrepreneur, I'm anti-SEC, and I'm anti-DOJ, but they just don't look at things the way we do.
So I think those are fair points that Martin just made. Those are very fair points. And I think that he gave an example and statement earlier about how, he effectively was the martyr, if you want to call it, for his company. And then his company went on after his time served. So again, I do like what Martin says. Martin says, about the government laws as they stand versus the public perception. And we have mulled it over for many hours this morning, and it will continue to be a discussion. Going forward, if you take the products that have a RH label or icon out of the equation, these things are social consensus, in my opinion. The social consensus that 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin, maybe that's provable in math, or a transaction from one address of control to a different address of control. But when people say things like, I'm in Bitcoin because it's freedom, some people actually buy those things because of freedom. Some people buy gold because of freedom. Some people say that they have a stake in real estate because they think that they have sovereignty over that real estate. So like the idea is why we're in cryptocurrency, I believe. Sure, there's a lot of people that are gravitate to the fact that you can multiply your money, or you can get a return that's above inflation, or whatever it is as far as your purchasing power. But that's why we're all here. Sure. The origin story, if you want to call it fair launch, if you want to say that, hey, miners can volunteer their electricity and their hardware, their GPU, so that they can have this magic token that has no value whatsoever because they can't even buy fucking pizza. Maybe that was that clique and that group. And certainly over the past 13 years, that group, if they're still here, they're not paying $1,000 for their Starbucks coffee at the purchasing price of the Bitcoin that they bought. They are profiting from the narrative and from the idea of cryptocurrency being ability to transact between people. And yet most of the marketplace is not between people. Most of the marketplace is yield promises that are not on code, on contract. They're on central exchanges.
Let's do this. So Scott, I'll go to you first. By the way, for anyone in the Hex community, the best person to target in your attacks is Scott. Make sure you tag him and you spam his
already happening. He's got nothing.
Honestly, it's very important.
Can I make one quick point about just what they've been saying right now? I think what this is really showing is that the way that the Hexicans see things versus everyone else, it's entirely different. So like it's almost like fruitless to just kind of carry on with the argument. But also, I think what this is showing is that while other people in crypto think that they're the ones that are, innovating and pushing for freedom, the Hexicans really are. We're innovating in capital formation with this whole premise of this sacrifice. We're innovating in monetary
but this, you can't call sacrificing an innovation.
Why not?
Because it seems to me
Mario,
yes, Soldier.
Mario,
yes,
by the way, did you know that the conviction rate is 95% because most of the times the cases never go to trial. Most of them get settled out of court.
Yeah, the government do you not
see how this is simply EOS 2.0? Give us a piece of the money that you made, and let's keep it moving.
But here's the thing: say they take them down. Say worst case scenario happens, sent away for life. Do you think, just from the personalities that you've spoken to and what you see online, do you think that makes us as a people shy away, or does that only embolden us? So it's like, okay, what's the worst that could happen here? And I think Gary used the word martyr.
I don't know. Like the price is
guys. If you're talking about martyr, we're no longer.
Yeah. So
I don't think
that language. I'm just telling you honestly.
Scott, don't diminish. No,
that makes it sound like.
No, I think
I'm not.
Dude,
I'm not.
I think it's a very good cult.
You say cult like it's a bad thing. You say cult like it's a bad thing. What I really view us we're more like a political group. That's more so than a cult. Which political groups kind of are like.
I'm just saying, using the word that our leader is going to martyr himself makes it sound that way.
Yeah. So if you think that if Richard was put away for something that everyone else viewed positively, you don't think that would only embolden us?
It might, but what if the keys go with him or something? Are they government?
But what does embolden us mean? Like you'll just complain more on Twitter, or what exactly would you do?
No, we continue. Probably the main complaint over the last couple of years has been that Richard hasn't been active enough. It's like so many different groups and independent people have been contributing to the ecosystem in huge ways, and it's like we're all kind of brought together in this group, and so it's cool. He falls down, the next person steps up, and it just carries on. Like that's our strength.
You know what I find? I find ironic? The irony. The irony is that Richard warned everybody about Celsius about a year and a half before it happened.
I know.
Everybody about FTX about a year and a half before it happened.
That doesn't mean. Yeah, I know. You could be, but soldier. You could. No, but you could be.
Seriously though, who did he fraud? What Hexican has told you? What Hexican has told you that he has been defrauded by Richard Hart? What Hexican? Nobody. No Hexican will ever come to you and tell you that they were defrauded by Richard Hart. It's stupid. It's stupid to say that. No, you speak to people that are not Hexicans. If you speak to Hexicans, not one of them will come up to you and tell you, I was defrauded by Richard Hart. Maybe I bought the top. Maybe I bought the top.
Go ahead, Jack.
So that's actually BS, because if 100% of Hexicans loved Richard so much,
there'd be no case.
There would be no case, exactly. Some people...
It's not that they love him.
It could be brought by anyone.
Love him or hate him, he has not defrauded anybody. If you put the top of a coin, right? If you put the top of something and then it went down 90%, were you defrauded by the founder? What is Zen? Zen has been nothing but a down forever coin.
No one,
Soldier. Jack, have you defrauded somebody?
Soldier, just to get Scott, Scott, mute him. I don't have my phone, Scott. You gotta. Okay, no, here you go.
So the only thing I'm saying is that...
One second. Just to clarify something, nobody is saying that the Hexicans would say he defrauded them. The claim of gout fraud is if he spent $12 million of their money on cars.
And if he already had $30 million before that, if he already had $30 million before that,
Soldier, you gotta. Scott, can you?
If it's on chain,
Scott, I don't have my phone. Scott, can you mute Soldier? Just please, bro. Soldier, just take a breath, man. Jack, I'll let you respond, because Soldier, I think that will be the final time we'll respond to this, because I think you don't understand what the issue is. No one said it's because the price went down. If you go to every startup, my whole portfolio, my VC startup portfolio that we've invested in, all of them are down even more than Hex. Doesn't mean they're all frauds, and I don't think anyone's making that argument. Correct. This is just crypto startups 101. And we won't repeat the argument again, but Jack, I'll let you respond quickly before I ask my final question.
Yeah, so it's thank you. It's very, very difficult to say what is fraud and what is not. The facts is that a lot of people are feeling I guess, mistreated by Richard or just by the optics of his behavior. So that's definitely, caused the rift in the community, and that's why we have this case. The biggest issue again is this concept of sacrifice, and we just had a discussion 10 minutes ago. If you're sacrificing, why do you need a token? If you truly don't need any expectations, why don't you just send money to the contract and then you truly have nothing to gain from anything? And then there's this argument about financial performance, how Accusses this best thing performed really well. But then again, if you're sacrificing, why do you care about the performance? Ultimately the chart, if it goes up, it's marketing and people feel like they want to talk about it. So what's unfortunate about the situation, during the bull market, pretty much everything went up, and it amplified this concept of sacrifice, which is essentially a word salad that is used to sell digital items with hope that they will not be labeled securities. That is ultimately the core of the case here, is that somebody, essential figure, gets the benefit from using some sort of an incantation, so to speak, like this word sacrifice, and get people in. And everybody's believe that, okay, well, if we do sacrifice, which is the same thing as really investment, it's actually not an investment. They're still going to make a ton of money, and it's not going to be security. And so now this thing is in front of us, and let's see what happens.
Let me ask